cover the next topic, which kind of dovetails into the economic impact and outlook. And you've touched on it. It's basically the subsidies or the assistance that the U.S. government is providing for business. And I know this is relevant for all of our business owners. So if we could go to the next slide, I'd like to introduce Mark Liu, our General Counsel at AppDirect, to talk about the U.S. government assistance. Mark?
Hi, thanks everybody. Happy to be here. I have to maybe give the same disclaimer that Aaron gave. This is informational and not necessarily legal advice. So I encourage you to consult your advisors on any of the items we're going to be discussing today, especially my section around government assistance. As Aaron mentioned, the reason why we're all here, this is really an exceptional time. And it's a really exceptional time for the governments to step up. There's a lot of information out there and a lot of kind of current rulemaking around details, eligibility regarding these funds, frankly, that the government's making available. I think my goal today is not to go through each of those in detail. Generally speaking, I've been trying to inform on the various vectors where folks on this call can seek assistance. I was just on a call yesterday with a lot of lawyers, and it was a 2-hour session on one part of the CARES Act, right? So there's a lot of questions around that, and I think as we kind of move through over the course of the next few weeks, we'll get more clarity. But I will talk through a few of these things. But my goal here is not to get into any real details. There's just a lot of uncertainty out there, and ultimately, the cohort on this call is really the audience for a lot of the government assistance, and you guys are really the backbone of the American economy, and so I think the government is trying to do the right things here. But generally speaking, there are kind of 3 vectors that I kind of look at where this group can seek assistance. The federal government, the state governments are getting very much involved, as well as counties and municipalities. So maybe we could flip to the next slide, please. The two high-level pieces of legislation that is getting a lot of the press right now, as Aaron kind of mentioned, is number 1, the CARES Act. It's a $2 trillion package to support businesses. The other one was passed a little earlier last month, called the FFCRA, and these acronyms are a mouthful, I know, but I think we're all going to unfortunately get to know these things pretty well. Both pieces of legislation, I think, as a lot of people know, these legislation were written rather hastily, and specific rulemaking around these items are ongoing. The Treasury Department just released new information last night on the eve of taking applications for these small business loans, and I'll talk a little about that. But this is real-time rulemaking. And a lot of this is just kind of slogging through what the Treasury Department is coming up with, the rules that ultimately Congress has handed to the Treasury Department. So a lot of companies are focused on these 2 pieces of legislation. Why don't we go to the next slide? So the first one is the what we call I even need to double check the acronym here, Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This was signed into law mid-March, and this was really the first big piece of legislation to come out of the US government. And fundamentally, it provides 2 things. It provides an emergency paid sick leave, and then it also expands the FMLA, the Family and Medical Leave Act. And from a super high level, this basically gives both employees and employers a break if employees start getting sick. In particular, it gives cover to the companies to continue paying employees if they get sick or they need to take care of somebody that got sick. And this is actually law as of now. I think it became effective 2 days ago on April 1st. And technically, maybe one thing that is actionable for this group is that there were notifications that the Department of Labor came out with, those posters that you have to put up in the workplace. One of those posters is on the FFCRA, that technically all businesses in the US need to have those posted internally, or not so much internally these days, really on some sort of internal web page. We've done that ourselves at AppDirect, so that's maybe one thing that you can do coming out of this, which is at least informing and giving your employees visibility into some of these programs. So yeah, these were really designed to benefit employees who are getting sick, frankly. And on the flip side, there are tax credits. Covered employers do get dollar for dollar reimbursement. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of conditions and even some caps. And again, I'm not going to go into details, but this is one vector that I think this group can certainly take a look at. Why don't we go to the next slide, please? So the CARES Act, as Aaron mentioned, there's a lot of activity here. And I think this might be one of the most relevant pieces of legislation for this group. There are a lot of rules for the funds, as you can imagine, and Treasury guidance continues to evolve. One thing that, from a process perspective, how you can apply for the small business loans is really going through your own bank. So one thing that the Treasury did do is to tweak the SBA rules such that you don't have to go to a narrow subset of lenders who are qualified to give loans under the SBA. For the CARES Act, you could actually basically go to your own bank. You go to Bank of America, basically any FDIC insured entity. So like I said, that's basically every bank, most of the major banks, and then also credit unions. So what the Treasury has done from a big picture perspective is they're giving guidance to the banks in order to give out these loans. Okay, so it's not like you go to the SBA to get these loans. You actually go through your own banks and your own lenders. There are basically two big programs that are getting a lot of the news here. So one is and I need to check all these acronyms again. One is called the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, and the other one is the Emergency Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The one that is getting a lot of attention is the PPP right now. This is a very generous program which basically can give forgivable loans. So in other words, you get the money and you don't need to pay it back. There are a lot of conditions. From a big picture perspective, it's focused on payroll and rent and utilities. So if you use the funds from those type of loans, then you will be able to apply to have those portions of the loans forgiven. And that's very appealing to a lot of folks. This is effective as of today. You could actually go in and apply through your banks. A lot of banks, frankly, are not set up to be taking the applications, but technically, as of today, you could go in and apply for these loans, and you only have until June 30 to do it. So those are absolute. As Aaron said, I can't imagine the scenario where the government will kind of widen the program again and extend it. But for now, these are the terms. And there are a lot of details, and I don't have time to get into all of it, but we'll be happy to take some questions around it on the back end. Kind of a related benefit is the EIDL, this emergency loan. These are loans for up to $2 million, and the first 10,000 can be given out pretty quickly, and the first 10,000 of EIDL is technically a grant. So in other words, it's forgiven. But the rest of the EIDL loan is not forgivable. So that's a big distinction between whether you decide whether you want to apply for a PPP, which large swaths of that loan can be forgiven, or if you apply for an EIDL, which technically is not forgivable. So those are the two big loan programs that are getting a lot of activity in the past week or so. On the flip side, you can also elect to get a tax credit. So this is actually binary. You can either apply for the loan and take the loan funds, or you could take the tax credit, but you can't get both. So, you know, I highly recommend you talk to your advisors, financial and legal, to talk through which one makes the most sense for you. The tax credits are generally done through your, I think, quarterly tax filings on employment taxes and things like that. And there are, as you can imagine, lots and lots of conditions on it. I will say for both of these programs that, imagine, the government is very focused on fraud right now. And so when you certify, when you apply for these funds, you know, be careful that you at least make a good faith effort to make sure that everything you're saying and that you qualify. And again, I think your advisors would be able to help you a lot with that. I mean, I could spend days on this right now, but let me just kind of keep moving here as we work through some other vectors of potential assistance. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the last slide I have. There are a lot of programs at the state level as well as at the city levels. The state, a lot of the state benefits focus around sick leave laws. They want to make sure that employees and employers, to the same extent that the government's doing it with the FFCRA, the states are doing a lot of parallel provisions for companies located in those states. So I would encourage you to kind of take a look at what the states are offering. Also, there are a number of states granting extensions and forgiveness for basically corporate income taxes. I can't go through all the details right now, and it varies so much by state, but I know these things are out there that folks should take a look into. And maybe one of the kind of the lowest hanging fruit, so to speak, is at the city level. If you're located in a larger municipality, I know a lot of cities have a lot of offerings for microloans that are very fast. They're very generous terms. A lot of them are forgivable, and a lot of them are basically deferral programs. But I know I've heard, you know, Philadelphia, Chicago, San Francisco, New York. There are a lot of these programs out there. So I would encourage this group to kind of take a look into those. I think that as far as specific next steps, maybe we go to the next slide, please. I think couple of the biggest things that this group can do is really try to understand this PPP program, as well as potential tax credits. There's a lot of secondary sources out there that are publishing information around these programs. The thing about these publications is that they get dated very quickly. So I would actually encourage a group here to go straight to the sources and go to treasury.gov and irs.gov. They actually have a lot of helpful summaries, real-time summaries that are up to date, and you know you're getting the most up-to-date information to find out how to apply for these loans and these benefits. So that is maybe one thing that's maybe very actionable, which is, sure, the summaries are helpful from a lot of our providers, but ultimately the definitive answers are at the government websites. So I think that the applications for the PPP, like I said, are live today, technically. So maybe one thing you could do also is to contact your lender to see if you can qualify for this. I think that's about it. I know I went through a lot of items. There's a lot of questions around all these programs. My goal here wasn't to go into any details. I'm just trying to give kind of the lay of the land on the various potential programs that this group can take care of.